You are not a mistake. You are not a problem to be solved. Jen and Roth. It starts so quietly, doesn't it? This feeling that maybe you are a little too much, or not quite enough. That strange, aching pressure behind your ribs that makes you hesitate before you speak, before you ask for anything, before you even take up space in a room that was never labeled off limits yet somehow. Never felt fully yours. Maybe it began years ago when you were still figuring out how the world worked. When the people around you only loved the parts of you that were small, agreeable, easy to handle. Maybe no one ever said it out loud, but you learned somewhere along the way that being invisible was safer than being misunderstood. That if you shrink just enough, smooth your edges just right, someone might call that good. And so you did. You learned how to apologize without using the word sorry. You learned how to smile instead of speak. You learned how to take up as little emotional bandwidth as possible. You learned how to make your needs quiet, how to make your dreams polite. And eventually, you forgot where the real version of you went. It's a subtle kind of heartbreak, this habit of apologizing for your own existence. It doesn't always look like tears or breakdowns. Often, it looks like over-explaining why you're tired. It looks like laughing off things that hurt. It looks like saying no worries when there very much was something to worry about. It looks like flinching at your own desires. Like justifying why you're allowed to feel what you feel. Like asking for permission to be you. And the most tender part of all, you didn't choose this. You didn't wake up one day and decide to self-abandon for sport. You adapted. You coped. You did what your nervous system believed would keep you safe. But now, you're tired, aren't you? Not just physically. Not just the kind of tired that a nap can fix. You're tired in that deep, bone-heavy way that comes from holding yourself in too tightly for too long. From tiptoeing through relationships. From whispering in places where your voice deserves to rise. From dimming your spirit in the hopes that no one will call it arrogant or selfish or too much, and still someone probably did. That's the cruel thing about chronic self-erasure. It never actually earns you the peace you were promised. People don't always appreciate your gentleness. Some just learn how to walk on your softness like it's a rug. So you keep apologizing. For asking for help, for needing more than crumbs, for crying, for healing slower than you should, for not being okay yet. You've even apologized for apologizing, haven't you? But here's what I want to say to you gently, honestly, from somewhere that knows exactly how that heaviness feels. You are not a burden for having a beating heart. You are not wrong for being someone who feels deeply, who needs rest, who takes time, who makes mistakes, who longs for softness, who hopes for healing. Your needs are not negotiations. Your voice is not an inconvenience. Your existence is not a disruption that must be endlessly explained. You are not here to perform politeness in exchange for love. You are here to be real, to be whole, to be messy and radiant and learning, to be quiet when you need silence and loud when your soul says speak. You are not required to earn the right to breathe deeply, or to show up flawed, or to simply be here right now without an apology tucked behind your smile. I know it's not that easy. The world has taught you to scan every room like a radar for potential rejection, to rehearse your sentences in your head before you say them out loud, to shrink your joy just in case someone calls it arrogance, to offer disclaimers before you express disappointment, to hold your own hand under the table and hope nobody notices you're shaking. But hear me gently again, you are not the problem. Your sensitivity isn't the problem. Your compassion isn't the problem. Your fear of being too much or not enough or both at the same time. Also not the problem. The problem is the pressure to contort yourself into something acceptable. The systems, the relationships, the patterns that rewarded your silence more than your authenticity. The voice is sometimes external, sometimes internal. that said, be nice when what they really meant was, be smaller. So what if, for a moment, you stopped? What if you let yourself breathe all the way in, like the air was made for you too? What if you asked for something without explaining why you're allowed to want it? What if you didn't rush to say, sorry for having a human moment? What if you let your body take up space in a chair in a story in someone's life? Not because you've proven yourself worthy, not because you've been perfect, but because you exist, and that sweet soul is enough. Sometimes the apology isn't even in your words, it's in your posture. The way your shoulders round when someone interrupts you. The way your hands fidget when you're speaking your truth. The way your feet turn slightly toward the door during conversations that make you feel like you don't belong. Your body has learned to apologize before your mouth even opens. It's not weakness, it's survival. You've been collecting quiet strategies for years. Ways to stay invisible just enough to avoid being hurt, but present enough not to be forgotten. You've practiced the delicate art of appearing fine. You've mastered the script of I'm good, really. You've nodded when you wanted to scream and smiled when something inside you was cracking. And still you wonder why you feel so far from yourself. You see, living in a constant state of apology means building your life on unstable ground. You learn to be careful with every word, every gesture, every part of you that could be misunderstood. You become an expert in self-censorship. Not because you're dishonest, but because you're tired of carrying the consequences of being too honest. You shrink not because you're small, but because no one taught you how to stay whole in the presence of disapproval. And it's not your fault. Somewhere along the line, someone taught you directly or indirectly that love is something you must tiptoe toward. That kindness is earned through obedience. That being chosen means being convenient. That asking for clarity makes you difficult. That softness must be trimmed to be palatable. But let me ask you something now, something tender, something you don't have to answer out loud. What would it feel like to live one day without justifying your existence, not explaining your silence, not toning down your excitement, not apologizing for being late because you were crying in the bathroom trying to hold yourself together, not cramming your spirit into someone else's expectations just to keep the peace? What would it feel like to walk into a room and believe truly? Believe that you don't need to earn your right to be there, that your presence, just as it is, carries value, that you don't need to present a perfect version of yourself to be worthy of kindness, that your needs are not embarrassing, that your story doesn't require trimming to fit into someone else's frame. What if you stopped managing other people's comfort at the cost of your own self-worth? You are allowed to take up emotional space. You are allowed to say, I'm not okay without a performance of gratitude to cushion it. You are allowed to be complex, inconsistent, exhausted, joyful, grieving, growing, all at once. You are not too much. You are not enough. You are just human, which is more than sufficient. And if you've been caught in relationships, romantic, familial, professional, where you were taught to apologize for simply existing, I want you to know that wasn't love. That wasn't care. That was control wrapped in the language of politeness. Genuine connection doesn't make you smaller. It invites you to take your full shape. The people who truly see you, the ones who deserve to stay, won't ask you to edit yourself down to a more palatable version. They won't flinch at your truth. They won't recoil when you have needs. They'll honor your wholeness, not just your usefulness. And maybe part of your healing is unlearning the belief that you're only lovable when you're easy. You don't have to constantly apologize just to keep people close. You don't need to play the peacemaker every time your soul is aching. You can rest, you can breathe. You can say no, you can say this hurt me, you can say I need more than this, you can say nothing at all. You have the right to be here without bowing first. So, the next time you feel the instinct rise, that twitch of guilt, that automatic I'm sorry, that tightness in your throat when you're about to speak up, pause. Just for a moment, and ask yourself, am I really sorry or am I just afraid of being seen? Because sometimes what sounds like sorry is really, I hope you still like me. Please don't be upset with me. Let me prove I'm harmless. Let me protect myself from rejection. But you don't need to protect yourself by disappearing. Not anymore. You don't have to apologize for your healing, or for how long it's taking, or for how much you're still figuring out. You don't need to apologize for your truth, for your dreams, for your desire to be met with gentleness, for your need to be held without conditions. You don't have to keep begging the world for permission to simply exist. You are here, and that is already enough. Maybe the hardest part about letting go of the apology reflex is this: you start to feel everything again. Because when you stop shrinking to fit, you notice how small the room has been. When you stop saying I'm fine, you realize just how long you've been breaking in silence. When you stop apologizing for your existence, you're left with the unfamiliar, tender question, what do I need now that I finally get to ask? And that too can be scary. You might find yourself fumbling, wanting to speak but unsure what voice is yours and what was shaped by years of people-pleasing. You might set a boundary and then tremble for hours afterward, worrying if you were too harsh. You might have moments where you feel selfish just for not feeling guilty. But that's okay. Healing isn't graceful, it's human. Some days, you will still apologize out of habit. You will still overthink a message you sent. You will still downplay your pain in rooms that haven't earned your truth. But slowly, softly, another part of you will begin to rise. A wiser voice, one that says, wait, I don't owe this moment a performance. You begin to notice where your energy leaks, how you say yes to things that leave you resentful, how you overextend because you're afraid of being perceived as cold, how you carry guilt that was never yours to begin with. You start catching yourself in the act of over-explaining, and instead, you pause. You say, this is what I need. You say, I'm not comfortable with that. You say, no, without an essay attached. And yes, your hands might shake. Yes, your voice might crack. But still you said it. Still you chose yourself. That's not arrogance. That's not rudeness. That is what it looks like to rebuild trust with yourself. And slowly you begin to feel safer inside your own skin. Not because the world changed, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself to fit inside it. You stop offering emotional discounts just to be invited. You stop turning your boundaries into riddles. You stop labeling your needs as dramatic. And in their place comes space. Soft, quiet space where your truth can live without flinching. It's not about being fearless. You're still allowed to feel nervous. Still allowed to care what people think. Still allowed to want closeness, connection, harmony. But you no longer sacrifice yourself to maintain it. And that changes everything. You begin to notice who really listens when you speak without apologizing, who respects the shape of your truth even when it's inconvenient, who honors your no without needing a PowerPoint presentation behind it, who stays when you stop bending. And maybe you lose a few people along the way. Maybe the ones who preferred the quieter, easier version of you slip away. And yes, that hurts. But there is beauty in that loss too. Because every person who walks away when you stop apologizing for existing is someone whose closeness required your erasure. You don't need that kind of love. You don't need love that only shows up for your silence. You don't need company that only fits when you're small. You need and deserve relationships that breathe when you do. People who don't confuse vulnerability with weakness. People who say, I see you and mean it. People who meet your unfiltered self with softness, not scrutiny. And most of all, you need yourself. You need your own loyalty, your own patience, your own willingness to sit with your discomfort and say, even now I will not abandon myself. Because self-trust is not built through perfection. It's built through moments like these. Moments where your voice wavers, but you speak anyway. Moments where you want to rush back into apology, and instead you stay still. Moments where you don't know what comes next, but you choose honesty over approval. These are not small things. These are brave everyday acts of healing, and they are enough. So, if no one has told you lately, let me tell you now, in the gentlest way, I know how. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not difficult for having needs, feelings, boundaries, limits, triggers, fears, hopes, dreams, or desires. You are a human being, and you are learning to live like you deserve to be one. Let that be enough tonight. Let that be everything. Let that be the beginning of a new, quieter truth. You are already allowed, even if your voice still shakes, even if your heart still second guesses, even if you've spent years building your life around being easy to love. There is nothing more liberating, more quietly radical, than realizing you no longer have to beg for a space that was never meant to be conditional in the first place. You get to exist even when you're not productive. You get to rest even when nothing's finished. You get to grieve even when everyone else has moved on. You get to feel things fully even when they make others uncomfortable. You are not here to carry the weight of other people's comfort at the expense of your peace. You are here to live, to learn, to try, to stumble, to ask for softness without apology, to take up space in a world that told you your worth was negotiable, but it never was. And maybe you don't believe that yet. Maybe you hear these words and part of you flinches because it's still waiting for someone to say, "That's not true." Be smaller again. Maybe you've spent so long being accommodating, agreeable, adaptable, that the idea of being fully you feels dangerous. But let this be a seed. Let it sink in slowly like warm light on tired skin. You don't need to fix every broken part before you're allowed to be whole. You don't need to be perfect before you are permitted to rest. You don't need to explain your worth to anyone who needs a footnote to see it. You can stop apologizing now. You can stop over-explaining. You can stop holding your breath just in case someone says you're too much. Because when they say that, what they often mean is, I don't know how to meet someone who doesn't dim themselves for me. That is not your failure. That is their mirror. You don't need to shape yourself into a softer version just to make someone else feel comfortable standing in their own lack of softness. You can be light. You can be depth, you can be quiet joy or raw pain or sacred stillness, and you never need to say sorry for it, because your life is not a debt. You don't owe your beauty to anyone's gaze. You don't owe your calm to anyone's chaos. You don't owe your healing to anyone else's timeline. The only thing you owe to yourself is truth, and maybe it starts as a whisper, I deserve more than this. I'm not wrong for wanting to be seen. I can exist without performing my worth every day. Then, maybe it becomes a voice, then a knowing, then a boundary. And one day you look back and realize how far you've come. You notice you're breathing deeper, speaking slower, not shrinking in the places you used to tiptoe through, not apologizing for needing space, quiet, softness, clarity. You're not the same, and thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for the moments you finally said no more. Thank goodness for the nights you cried without explaining yourself. Thank goodness for the gentle rebellion of saying, I am tired and I choose rest. Because you're not healing just for the sake of becoming stronger. You're healing so you can finally feel safe in your own presence. So you can walk into a room, any room, and not flinch at the idea of being seen. So you can exist fully and freely, and trust that you no longer need to fold yourself into half-light just to be allowed. You already are. So tonight, let the weight slide off your shoulders. Not because everything is resolved, not because you finally earned it, but because you were never meant to carry so much shame just for having a heart. Take a deep breath, not the shallow kind you learned to survive with, but the full kind that moves all the way through your ribs and out again like a quiet sigh. And let that be your permission slip. You do not need to keep apologizing for existing. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be here exactly as you are. Let that truth settle in your chest. Let it be enough just for tonight. Let it carry you to sleep soft, whole, and finally free.